Welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting of the 27th of April 2021. I will start by acknowledging that we meet on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I'll also note that we are just emerging from lockdown, so we do have restrictions in place. We are live streaming as always. We do have some questions and statements in writing this evening, and we're also joined by members of the public gallery safely distanced in our chamber. And we have a combination of council members attending in person and on Zoom, but we do have a full complement of council members here this evening. We also have some of our staff present via Zoom as well, and some in the chamber. So we will commence the meeting, and starting with apologies, members of leave of absence. I note that we are all accounted for. So that takes us straight to public question time and the receiving of public statements. Members of the public gallery, thank you for being here. We do think we have to leave masks on while speaking, so if you wouldn't mind doing that at the microphone, I know it's a bit awkward. And if you would just like to come up to the microphone, there's no set order. If you could just state your name, the suburb in which you reside and the item that you are speaking to this evening. We do allow 3 minutes and the CEO does time. We do have one request for a deputation this evening, and that will follow on a little bit later. So can I call forward the first speaker, please?
Thank you very much. My name is Sam Corello. I'm the General Manager of Dental Health Services WA, and I've had previous interactions with both the Council and the City of Vincent. I've put a request to the Council that the current lease that we occupy at 31 Sydney Street be extended in parity with Kids Galore. I've given some extra information to the Council other than from the consumer's perspective, what we did as an organisation getting ready for our termination of lease. Once I had identified that Kids Galore had been extended, I wrote to the City asking them to confirm whether our lease expired on the 30th of June 2021. The City confirmed that back to me in writing in a letter that I used as the basis to go and commence a business case process asking for funds to relocate the clinic. Again, 2 other times I asked for an extension. I looked at an interim plan. Most of my clinics are old. I did build a new one 2 years ago that has physical disability access that accommodates this particular client base. The only issue I have is I can't offer four chairs as they currently have, only 2 as an interim solution. When I brought this up to the consumers, they were also noted that Kids Galore had an extension. So rightly so, as a group of clients who find change a bit difficult, they want parity and they want to stay at this existing clinic until I build them a new clinic. So I won't go through every page, but I think it's really important to focus on the major needs, which is we're going to try and make them only move once. The reason there's been a delay in the business case process is because of the government election. They went into caretaker mode. I was under the impression I would have approval for funding in March. I've now been told my approval for funding and the review of the business case won't occur till August 2021, and I can update the City as I get more confirmation. The budget process has been delayed, and that's the latest information I have. The business case identifies a new 4-chair clinic, a new location, more modern standards, and will basically deliver the same service in a different location. The issue to focus on is making these clients move twice. If we can avoid an interim solution and an interim solution that's not equivalent to what they have now, I think certainly the clients and the consumers will benefit. So I asked for an extension of parity, similar to Kids Galore, if that's possible.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. My name's Simon Thakra and I live in Perth. I wish to speak to agenda item 12.1, Chariton Street, 34 Cheriton Street. So I've been involved in the Norwood Neighbourhood Association for 10 years now, and I wrote the submission that's at attachment 2 of the agenda item. And that advises that the residents and community garden volunteers that I've consulted are supportive of the recommendation. Ultimately, the residents and the volunteers would like the community garden to continue in some form. It's a beautiful space. It connects with Norwood Park, and we've invested a lot of sweat equity into the garden over the years, and we think it is sustainable. It did suffer a blow when our garden coordinator, Anton Haynes, sadly passed away earlier this year. But we think we can regain a critical mass of volunteers. And the opportunity to partner with the Museum of Perth is really exciting for us. A staffed presence at the house would ensure that the garden can be open to the public for longer hours than we as an association were able to achieve. And just to clarify, our decision to wind up the association does not mean that we're not committed to the garden, just that we didn't think that an incorporated entity was necessary to coordinate those volunteers. So we are supportive of the management order being relinquished by City of Vincent, but only upon entry into a new management order with the Museum of Perth, so that there's a seamless transition between the two. And I think that's what all the recommendations that have been made is consistent with. So ultimately, and to conclude, we would like to see the community garden continue in some form, and partnering with the Museum of Perth seems the best opportunity to achieve this. And the rest is in my submission. So thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Can I just clarify, does it have to be on a specific agenda item?
No, not at a council meeting, no.
It doesn't have to be?
No, you can speak on on any matter.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, councillors, just a quick comment. My name is Ross Iapolo. I'm owner and resident in Leederville, just across the road. My concern that I want to raise to council is verge parking on Vincent Street. So with my interactions to date with the various rangers that have come out to our property at 257 Vincent Street and observed the parking, vehicle parking and trailers that are being parked on the verge, it's totally obscuring the vision for oncoming traffic when we exit the driveway. The rangers have admitted that it looks like there is clearly a obstruction, which is affecting the viewing for oncoming traffic to the east, coming from the lights at Loftus Street and Vincent Street. But they're saying that it's within the law. Current law permits verge parking, provided it's the resident of the particular property, and it's immediately in front of their dwelling. I've challenged this because 3 of the 4 people living at 257 Vincent Street have had near misses on car accidents. And in one incident, one of the oncoming traffic swerved to miss the vehicle exiting the driveway. So I have got a follow-up issue logged with the manager of the Rangers, and he's yet to come back to me, but I just wanted to raise it that it is clearly a public safety risk, and I'd like the council and the City of Vincent to relook at whether there's any scope to deny parking on verge in the interest of public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. I assume that we have your email address, given that you're in contact with the manager of Ranger Services. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Next speaker, please. Are there any further speakers this evening? Okay, thank you. I'll close public question time, but we will come back to you for a deputation. So the next item is applications for leave of absence. Oh, my apologies. We have a number of written statements and questions this evening. So we do have a number to get through, and our Manager of Governance will read those out. Thank you.
Through Mayor Cole, thank you. We have one statement and question from Gary Simmons of Perth on item 9.1. May I congratulate you on the work and time spent on this complex matter, as the plan addresses and provides for well thought out multi-use purposes for all community members. Question is in respect to the proposed removal of the heritage player huts located on the northern section of the existing lawn tennis courts, which Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage has approved subject to compliant photographic and written evidence. Can Council please consider and direct its planners to amend the draft plan to retain these amenities so that they are congruent to the use of the adjacent proposed landscape area and proposed community garden? In my opinion, this will provide for a shaded retreat for community members to relax and enjoy the sense of place that is being created, and at the same time preserve the heritage aspect of these outbuildings. By all means, still have them photographed and documented for precautionary reasons. Mary Kalura Oldham of Perth on item 10.2. I'm here in support of proposal 10.2. This one may take longer than 3 minutes. Sorry, Matt Cole. I understand that Council has the unenviable task of balancing the needs of visitors, businesses and residents within this area. However, rightly or wrongly, what I continue to hear is that somehow the needs of residents are secondary to the preferences or expectations of businesses or the public. For instance, I noted with interest that last week additional details concerning residents' current off-street parking provisions were requested to assist in consideration of the proposal. I wonder whether similar questioning or consideration was given in approving the following highly popular cafes, restaurants and businesses. I note we now have Chew Bakery with only street parking, Boo 2 with only street parking, Sayers Sister, Miller and Baker and the adjacent businesses along Lake Street with only street parking, numerous businesses and cafes along Bulwer Street with only street parking, the nearby hostel, Witch's Hat Hostel, although it has some on-site parking, it clearly cannot accommodate patrons at all times, as we've seen that parked vehicles overstaying the parking limits have been patrons of that hostel. The proposal before you suggests a 1 hour parking limit on the residential side of the street. In acknowledgement, I think that residences also have a life and daily business to conduct. Personally, I think there is a case to be made for resident-only parking along the residential side of the street. However, the current proposal is the least that can be done to compensate for the impact that approvals of businesses in this area has had on residents' lives. I hasten to add, this proposal is not about preventing people from accessing the park or businesses. It's about acknowledging that residents have needs too. The point that I've tried to make last week and tonight is that I, along with my neighbours, encounter daily challenges in gaining reasonable access to our homes, and this has become increasingly impossible over the last few years. The recently collected data presented for consideration this evening does not at all, in our view, reflect the day-to-day experience of myself or my neighbours. In our experience, by 9:30 a.m. on weekdays, the street is already almost to capacity, and on weekends it is consistently at capacity. As I tried to impress upon you last week, the issue is not just about our personal access to our homes, it is also the issue of adequate parking being available for family and friends who may want to visit, and indeed essential services required within our homes. Obviously, as I get older, this will be increasingly problematic for me and for others in my position. As you know, residents along Glendower Street do not have street verges. I do not know why this is the case and whether it has ever been the case. So this option, which is enjoyed by other Vincent residents, is not available to us. My neighbours along Lake Street, for instance, have this option. Even if all residents had rear access ways or constructed off-street parking, there would still be a need for street parking for service providers to access our homes. As I've stated before, my need for parking is an essential requirement in order for me to conduct my daily life. If a member of the public arrives and is unable to find parking in this area, they are undoubtedly disappointed, but they have the option of moving to another area to access another park or another cafe. I do not have this same option. And even if you were to say to me, well, move out of the area, the fact remains that the issue will be faced by the next occupant of my home. Finally, what is most disheartening and frustrating to me is that currently there are some people who are enjoying the privilege of free all-day parking. The fact that people are parked all day restricts other members of the public and residents from having access to parking bays. I'm not sure why all-day free parking should be allowed to continue under the current circumstances, especially given these individuals may or may not even be ratepayers. Adding salt to this wound is the fact that some people are enjoying all-day free parking, whether this is in a 3-hour restricted parking area or unrestricted area. And so the issue of adequate ranger patrols and monitoring of parking is extremely important in helping alleviate parking congestion, whatever the decision tonight.
It has been 3 minutes. We have received this in writing, and
Great.
also the questions that are asked were asked at the briefing. So I think we can move on to the next
Fine.
statement, please.
Suzanne Burke, Emerson Street, North Perth, on item 13.1. Recently, a decision was made to retain the newly spread wood chips at Beatty Park Reserve as part of the eco-zoning program. It is important to note that this program was rolled out without prior consultation or engagement with the community. When the wood chips arrived at the park, we were immediately alarmed, as previous administrative staff had made a commitment to us that wood chips would not be used at the park ever again, as they were a direct contributor to blocking drains in the car park at the rear of our properties. For clarity, when there is a significant rain or a storm, the wood chips float on the water and travel to the lowest point, which is where the drains are located, directly behind our properties. When the drains are blocked, the water travels onwards and into our properties. In 2010, this caused significant damage to our homes after a large volume of water flooded our home externally and internally. This is not an isolated incident, but was certainly the worst and was very traumatic. The recent decision to use and retain wood chips has been made despite residents providing historical evidence of wood chips blocking drains during significant rain events and subsequently causing flooding to homes on Emerson Street on more than one occasion. No logical reason or benefit has been provided to us to explain why it is important for the wood chips to remain. We fail to understand how their use outweighs the health and safety of residents. Over a series of meetings on site at the park in March of this year, residents have met with the Executive Director of Engineering, all councillors, the CEO and the Mayor to plead our case. On the 10th of April, we received an email letter from the CEO stating that the wood chips would remain and presented no risk of contributing to a flooding event. I've since sent 3 emails to the CEO with no response, asking the following, and I would like a response. Can you please provide more details on who has made this decision? Is it the CEO, the Mayor? Was it voted on by councillors? If there was a vote, what exactly was voted on and who cast their vote and which way? I believe we are entitled to know who has provided support and who hasn't. In the interest of full transparency, this information must be provided. In addition, the letter from the CEO states that the wood chips do not increase the flood risk to our properties. How can the CEO come to this conclusion when the evidence clearly contradicts this? It is my understanding that the hydraulic report in 2017, prepared by external consultants, showed water coming across the park from all directions. However, I've not been able to verify this because despite requesting a copy of the report on multiple occasions, I'm still waiting to receive it. Is there a reason why COV administration cannot release a copy of this report, which is a public document? If not, can you please provide it as requested? If this does indeed show water coming from the Charles Vincent corner of the park, which it has been proven that wood chips float across on, will the CEO reverse this decision? Undertaking these works without engagement has created great distress for residents. Further to this, when residents have raised valid concerns, a compromise was implemented to split the garden into half gravel and half wood chips. However, in the view of residents, this still leaves us at risk. This issue has created distress and endless hours of meeting, time spent writing emails, taking levels and caused sleepless nights. I support Councillor Hallett's decision to put forward this motion and encourage City of Vincent to comply with its claims of engaging with the community, being accountable and transparent in their decision making, to avoid others having to go through the lack of engagement and lack of empathy that we've encountered. Vern Gardam of Mount Lawley, item 9.2. Briefing notes to councillors summarised my comments at the briefing session as mentioned that there are errors in the report and attachments. This is incorrect. I viewed the tape and I said there are errors in the report and there are errors in the report and there is a missing attachment which was identified. It is an appendix attached to the consultant's report of administration provided and more detailed consideration to what typical past and present projects may sit at different points of the IAP2 spectrum. This attachment is referred to in the consultant's report, page 16, paragraph 3. The appendix was not attached to the consultant's report that went to the briefing session. It does not form part of the consultant's report that council has before it this evening. At the briefing session, I requested information about the community consultation panel, in particular, how many panelists, how were they selected, how many attended the meeting with the consultant, what feedback did the community panel provide the consultant, what, if any, feedback did administration provide to the panel, and if feedback was provided, when was it provided? Through you, Mayor Cole, with that comment, it notes that there's an issue with the report that's been presented to council. Just wanted to raise that that is incorrect, and the consultant's report does have the appendices attached that are referred to in the report. Final statement, oh no, not final statement, second last statement, third last statement. Teresa Mangione of Perth, item 12.1. I spoke at the briefing last Tuesday in regards to the same matter, 8.1, where Mr. McLennan assured me that I would be contacted during the week by Jordan. This did not happen. I wish to put forward my proposal in relation to the relinquishment by the City of Vincent of my neighbouring property at 34 Chariton Street, Perth, in the incidents that the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage choose to progress with the sale. I propose to purchase and restore the property to its former glory, offer it for lease back to the City of Vincent or Museum of Perth, also allowing the Norwood Garden Association to continue their community garden on the land. I've offered this many times over the past 5 years to the City of Vincent and the department, my interest being to try and resolve the drug use and squatter issues on the property. As I stated at the briefing last Tuesday, there is no mention or copy of any correspondence from me containing my proposal. My proposal would alleviate the financial burden from the department while still enabling the Museum of Perth to occupy the property, and a big plus being additional funding to the department resulting from the sale. Please consider my offer. Dudley Meyer of Highgate on items 13.1, 10.2 and 9.2. Something similar to the notice of motion, item 13.1, was proposed by the community at the AGM. So council had the opportunity to institute something like this before. This motion therefore appears to be in response to a single issue, Beatty Park Reserve, rather than addressing a broader principle. Moving this at the same time that council is considering the consultation policy, item 9.2, highlights a flaw of the draft policy. If the consultation policy was well structured, Councillor Hallett's motion would simply be a case of making an amendment to the policy. This would provide the community with some visibility and some certainty about whether consultation would take place in similar situations. The policy as it is drafted does not seem to provide either visibility or certainty to this and the myriad of similar situations. The policy only seems to provide some visibility and certainty for planning issues. The fact that the administration is proposing to make changes to parking restrictions in item 10.2 before it has consulted the community indicates to me that all of the preparation work with consultants over the last few months has been completely lost on some members of the administration who should have been on top of this. It is also of concern that the draft policy provides a lot of nice sounding words, but not much for which we can hold the administration to account. In this regards, it is a step backwards. The fact that there are still a number of typos indicates to me that this has been rushed and is more about ticking a box or meeting a deadline than producing a considered piece of work. Ben McLaughlin of Perth on item 9.1. As the facility manager of Robertson Park Tennis Centre for the previous 10 years, I would like to formally express my support for the proposed Robertson Park development plan, in particular the planned development of the Robertson Park Tennis Centre. The synthetic and hard tennis courts are at the end of their lifespan and in desperate need of resurfacing. Resurfacing all the courts to hard courts would be more cost-effective long-term and is a recognised surface suitable for player development, events, tournaments and competitions. Changing the existing lighting to LED will provide very high quantity and quality of light and provide good visibility for players at night for evening play and will require less ongoing maintenance. This is also a much more environmentally friendly option compared to the current setup. Robertson Park Tennis Centre is at capacity Monday to Friday during peak hour, 5:30 to 9:30 p.m. Any additional lit courts would cater for the current demand as we regularly turn away players. Although the grass courts are cosmetically pleasing, they are considered more of a luxury. They're expensive to maintain at $66,000 per annum and require ongoing treatment at times and are unplayable for long periods of the year. There are also no lights on the grass, which means they can't be used during peak evening times. I have no objection to the proposal of introducing 3 multi-purpose courts. I believe this will attract the wider community to use the facility. For many years, we have experienced an issue with a parking lot. Car park is generally full. However, these people are not visiting Robertson Park Tennis Centre or the park. I have a team of staff who are required to work at the facility for 4 to 12 hours per day and are fearful of receiving a parking ticket. I support the proposal of increasing the parking space. Also, would the council consider allocating a set number of parking bays for staff? Overall, the most important aspect for the development proposal for me would be to see improved fencing with a more secure entrance to the facility and public toilets being built in the park. Over the past 10 years, we've experienced many incidents with antisocial behaviour in the park, which generally results in unruly visitors at Robertson Park Tennis Centre. The rest of the development plan looks extremely welcoming, and I'm an advocate for introducing the wider community to this fantastic park. We also have one statement that's related to an item not on the agenda from Dudley Meyer of Highgate. That'll be included in the minutes.
Thank you very much, Acting Manager of Governance Services. So we will now go to requests for leave of absence, and we do have one this evening from Councillor Susan Gontaszewski. That being for the period of the 26th of June to the 8th of August 2021 due to personal reasons. I have a mover and seconder to approve the leave of absence. Move Councillor Hallett, seconded Councillor Smith. All those in favour? I declare that carried. We then go to the receiving of petitions, deputations and presentations. And we do have Joan Martin here this evening to present a deputation for up to 5 minutes. Joan, we welcome you back to the chamber.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Cole. Obviously, this is addressing the petition which was presented at the last council meeting. It is with deep concern that I read that the administration has recommended that a lease extension of only 3 months be granted to the Health Department for the Special Needs Dental Clinic, with a possible extra 3 months after that, as set out in the briefing notes for this council meeting. Which basically states a short-term extension of the current lease. I'm just reducing this and short-term license of the 9 car park bays to provide the dental health services with further time to secure an alternative site to operate on the following key terms. 3.1, a 3-month extension of the lease commencing 1st of July and expiring the 30th of September. And 3.2, a 3-month further extension of the lease and license term at the discretion of the city's CEO, based on the progress made by the Minister for Health to secure an alternative site. The Minister of Health must submit its relocation plan and timeframe to the city by the 31st of August 2021. And you have heard from Sam Corello tonight that he is anticipating a response from the Minister from Treasury, I guess, to do with this in August of this year. I would like to take this opportunity to point out that over the past 3 months, the government, of course, was firstly in caretaker mode during the lead up to the election, followed by a period of settling into new portfolios. So not a great deal occurred. 2 natural disasters occurred quite apart from COVID, lockdowns and quarantine problems. During this time, the business case, which Sam Corello has mentioned to you, for the permanent relocation of the clinic was prepared and presented and is awaiting final approval, which is anticipated to be in August. It has been pointed out that the approval of the relocation is consistent with existing state government policies and priorities. So this gives a great deal of credence to the presentation of this business case. I do, however, note that in 3.2 above, that the further 3-month extension on the lease is to be at the discretion of the CEO based on the progress made by the Minister of Health to secure an alternative site. While it is hopeful that a business case is approved by then, its execution will take time to complete. It is at this point that we would hope that the Council would approve a further extension to mirror that of Kids Galore, as was petitioned to you last month, to allow for construction to take place. Naturally, if construction could be completed prior to December 2025, the Special Needs Dental Clinic would vacate sooner, as it is noted that Kids Galore has already secured an alternative site with the intention to commence construction of a replacement childcare centre in mid-2021, which is when they will be starting, and it will result in them relocating from Haynes Street within the 5-year lease extension, possibly, though indicating in 2023, I noted in their documents that they supplied to you. While your administration supports delaying the conversion of 31 Sydney Street to public open space until January 22, stage 1 of the development plan, it is of grave concern that they do not support an extension beyond this date at this stage, as we requested in the petition. We acknowledge that providing parity with Kids Galore at this stage will be challenging, as further consultation with the community would first be required before a delay to the creation of the new park could be considered. It is hoped that this will be considered further once the Department of Health has provided you with timeframes for the new clinic prior to the 31st of August. This is also important as the Attorney General's Office have indicated to you that they would not consider any extension beyond December 2021 without the Dental Health Services transition planning timeframes, let alone a permanent solution. With regard to any transition plan, all along we have pointed out that there is no equivalent interim solution for these vulnerable members of our community. At best, the service would be reduced from 4 rooms to 2 rooms, as Sam has indicated, in an unsuitable environment for many. This would double the recall of clients from 14 months to anywhere between 28 months to 3 years, allowing for emergencies. I've got about that much to read. This is an intolerable position for these vulnerable clients to face. I once again ask on behalf of the clients that the Council seek a variation to the Haynes Street Reserve Developmental Plan from the Attorney General's Office to allow the clinic to remain in situ, with the permanent relocation of the clinic occurs over the next 4 years or less, as there is no suitable interim alternative solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joan. We're now dealing with item 6, which is confirmation of minutes for the ordinary council meeting of the 23rd of March 2021. Could I please have a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes? Moved by Councillor Hallett, seconded by Councillor Fotakis. All those in favour? I declare, so yes, thank you. Declare the minutes carried. Announcements by the presiding member. I've just would like to announce that the CEO has provided some health advice to me that has been run through our Manager of Health, otherwise known as Manager of Built Form and Wellbeing. And that when we are performing our roles, we are able to take off our masks. It was problematic for members of the public gallery because they are sharing a microphone, but when you are speaking, you are entitled to remove your mask while you're speaking. So I will do so. I just wanted to say that we have just come through a 3-day lockdown. We have seen another fantastic response by our community. We have been quite lucky this time to come through that. And today the City of Vincent has been trying to get back to business as much as possible. We have had 20 people at a time swimming at the Beatty Park swimming pools. We have had a quiet day at the library, but the library is open. And we have had a mixture of staff working from home and working in the administration, with all of our on-duty staff such as rangers and waste services continuing as normal, but masked up and taking the safe precautions. It has been a bit of a disappointing time in terms of the timing. Obviously, we didn't have the opportunity to conduct the City of Vincent's Anzac Day for the 2nd year running. I know that is a tough thing for veterans in particular to experience. It's a really important day for the community to come out and show veterans and servicemen and women that we deeply value the service that they provide and how important that is in both wars past and present. So that was a bit rough the 2nd year in a row, and we were all ready to go, but it was wonderful to see the community again come out to their driveways for dawn service. And I met my neighbours on the street at a safe distance, but also saw some photos of some wonderful things throughout the community, including various instruments playing the last post. So great credit to our community, great resilience shown. And again, our local businesses showed that they are able to adapt at a moment's speed. We are getting quite used to this situation, and each time it happens, I think things do swing into action very quickly and again out. So we had also had to delay some of our community consultation that we had underway. We were due to meet face to face on our asset sustainability and management strategy around Vincent, both over the weekend and this week, but we will be rescheduling that to make sure that that happens. So also hoping that on Saturday we can get down to Banks Reserve and meet with our community members there. So well done to everyone in the community again. Fantastic result. And as our Premier has been telling us, continue to wear your mask, to sanitise, to get tested if you're feeling unwell. And this all makes the greatest difference to where we will be on Saturday this week. Moving along to declarations of interest, I'll go to the CEO because I understand we do have at least two.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Through you, Mayor Cole, I do have a third declaration of interest. The first two were noted for the briefing session last week. The first one is from myself in relation to item 11.1, Derby Yerrigan Health Service Aboriginal Corporation, Leederville Gardens Trust COVID-19 funding, noting that I'm married to an employee at Derby Yerrigan Health Services. I have had no involvement in the preparation of this report and will not remain in the chamber while this item is being discussed. The second is from Councillor Gondaszewski, an impartiality interest in relation to item 9.1, the draft Robinson Park Development Plan. The extended interest being that Councillor Gondaszewski's daughter is a member of the North Perth Dynamites Netball Club that may utilise any netball facilities implemented should the plan be approved. And the third declaration is a financial interest from Councillor Wallace in relation to item 9.3, which relates to the draft Leederville precinct structure plan, noting that Councillor Wallace is employed by GHD, who prior to Councillor Wallace's joining council were contracted by the City of Vincent to prepare the Leederville Activity Centre plan. Councillor Wallace notes that he has not been involved in the preparation of the plan in his duties at GHD. And that's all, Mayor Cole.
Thank you, CEO. I'll now go to council members to see if there are any items that they wish to raise in addition to those items already raised by members of the public gallery. Those items already raised are 12.2, 12.1, 9.1, 10.2, 9.2 and 13.1. Councillor Hallett. Councillor I might try some Zoom people before I go there. Councillor Wallace, do you have any items to raise? Councillor Smith. Councillor Castle. Councillor Loden.
9.4, please.
Thank you, Councillor Loden. Councillor Fotakis.
No, me.
Councillor Toppelberg.
Nothing further, thank you.
Councillor Gondaszewski.
9.3 and 17.1, please.
I'm missing my second page. 17.1, yes, I know. Thank you, Councillor Gondaszewski. I'm just going to cross-check against amendments to make sure they're all covered. I'll call forward. Oh no, you have already called forward 9.3. That's fine. Um, 12.1.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll read out the agenda item numbers which are being proposed to be moved on block, which includes item 10.1, item 11.1, noting I declared an interest in that item, item 11.3, item 11.4, item 11.5, item 11.6, item 11.7, and item 12.4. I'll just check if Wendy got those, and I'll leave the room for that vote. Mayor Cole.
Do you need to leave the room as you're not a voting member? But if it makes you feel more comfortable, by all means. Okay, can I please have a mover and seconder for the on-block items? Move Councillor Fatakis, seconded Councillor Castle. All those in favour? I declare the on-block items carried. So members of the public gallery that are remaining, what we do from here is we deal with the items that have been raised by members of the public gallery first, and then we will go back to the remaining items and deal with those sequentially once we've dealt with those. So the first item raised this evening by a member of the public gallery was item 12.2, which is the extension of lease for North Perth Special Needs Shalom Coleman Dental Clinic, 31 Sydney Street, North Perth, and advertising of sale of 25 Sydney Street, North Perth. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item, please? Move Councillor Toppelberg, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Can I just get some comments firstly from the CEO? It's been consistently indicated to elected members, including in the chamber, that there's been little to no contact with or from the decision makers in the department. But we heard from the gallery tonight that that there was some information sought some time ago and perhaps some miscommunication. If we can get some comments firstly around what the city thinks that the department knew and when in terms of the lease and the plan. Also just confirmation that this doesn't, an alteration to this part of the plan wouldn't require any liaison other than as a courtesy with the Office of the Attorney General, given that it doesn't fall within the area that's under the that's subject to the deed of trust, is the words I'm looking for. And also the reason, I understand in the report that it says what is being proposed, but the reason why a 3 month with a 3 month option is proposed if it's conceded by the administration that it wouldn't be possible to relocate within that time, and why we as a potential lessor would require a relocation plan to be submitted when effectively it's none of our business if we're no longer leasing the property to the tenant.
Through Mayor Cole, there were 4 questions there. If I got them all correctly, I might just ask Councillor Toppelberg to make sure I respond to all 4. The first related to our communication with the Department of Health. That has been ongoing and it has been in writing, noting that we didn't get a formal request for lease extension until late 2020. Our communication with the tenant has always been premised on the lease expiring at the end of that lease date, and council had previously considered aligning the ending of all those lease dates to the middle of this year. The second related to the deed of trust. Just to note that the Attorney General's approval was for the transition plan as a whole, which included the deed of trust, but part of the overall package was predicated on the early conversion of half the site to public open space, with a delay on the second half, which did relate to the issue around the Kids Galore lease situation and the time that Kids Galore needed to relocate. So they are not completely separable portions, and our understanding is that given that the overall site as part of the transition plan is to produce a community park, it's not, it still does require the Attorney General's approval of any change to that transition plan, and that's been our understanding. That has been the terms of our engagement with the Attorney General that we would deliver on 50% of the park sooner, and then the latter 50% subject to Kids Galore meeting similar benchmarks in terms of advising on what the transition plan would be for the kids, for the childcare facility, which is now underway. The proposal for a 3+3 month lease extension has been predicated on the city not having clear advice on what the Department of Health's transition plan would be for that site, and the logistics on how that would continue. Also noting that the petition that council's received and the support that we've received from the parents and families of those clients. And we wanted to make sure that we had some formal advice from the Department of Health on what the transition arrangements would be, and some certainty around decision making around that, which is less than what has been the request, which is essentially parity with the Kids Galore lease and a longer term lease extension of up to 5 years. There was one other question, Councillor Toggelberg.
So the other was essentially, as the lessor, what either rights or obligations we or they have for us to need to know what their transition plans are if the service is not being provided by the city or expressly for the ratepayers of the City of Vincent, if they are a lessee of the city's property. I'm a bit confused as to why if we're prepared for them to be there for 6 months as a time period, why we require them to justify to us what they intend to do thereafter. Should we not just be making a decision on a time period?
Through you, Mayor Cole, our recommendation around that was predicated on the dental clinic and the Department of Health being an outstanding and valuable tenant over a long period of time, and providing a unique and much valued service to the community and to the state as a whole, given that it's a statewide facility, and us wanting to make sure that there was a smooth transition from that location to another location, and for us to be able to work with the tenant on that. I'm not sure what that means for a hard deadline on the 31st of December this year, but we do have advice that a business case would be approved, or hopefully considered and approved by the state government in August this year. But I understand that business case will still be predicated on around about an 18-month construction and build process.
Sorry, so just a final question. So if that is the case, if that timeline was met, is it presumed by administration that there would be a request for a further extension for that 18-month period to allow construction or fit out of a new premises to occur?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I think I can understand the confusion and the angst, I suppose, and certainly from the people who rely on the service, that the difference between seeing potentially a 3-month extension and an acknowledgement by us as the lessor that there may well be an extended time. I just want to make a few comments, and I'll listen to the debate, but the idea of parity with Kids Galore, the circumstances are different, the businesses are different, the services are different, the cost of build and fit out, the obligation and the service it provides to City of Vincent ratepayers, I think is different as well. There was, if you go back to I think the start of the current lease, I think it is, or the renewal of the lease. Prior to that, I think that they were leasing at Peppercorn, and there was a lot of discussion about cost shifting and whether a small local government had an obligation to provide a building at almost no charge to a state government department to provide what is an essential service, but was a regional service and not something that was particular to Vincent. And that was protested at the time, but was resolved through the lease amount being, my understanding, is near enough to commercial rates that are being paid. I have some concerns about the wording of the recommendation, and that it effectively gives no security of tenure when the only real proposal, or we obviously have an obligation to our transition plan, but I do have concern that there's no intent to put anyone else in there, but other than the demolition of the building, there is no urgency. And if we know there's going to be a longer time frame, I think that that's something that we can perhaps look at. And as I said, I'll listen to the debate, but further to some of the questions that were asked last week, I would also be supportive of separating the proposal to advertise the adjacent lot for sale. I understand the market conditions that are in terms of the timing that are seen as being favourable, but I think that conflating the two issues is actually confusing and clearly stressful for the current lessee. But I'll listen to the debate and consider an amendment thereafter.
Thank you, Councillor Toppelberg. Councillor Konchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I'm supportive of the lease extension. Agree that it does not provide long-term certainty that the facility will be able to remain until a new facility is built and constructed and ready to take on clients. Until we see a business case approval from the Department of Health, I don't believe that we can actually make those plans, and I don't believe that 2025, in light of the progress that Kids Galore have made in relation to their relocation, I don't believe a 2025 date is appropriate. But yes, I am supportive of an extension of lease to allow those decision-making processes to occur. I believe there's an amendment here on the Lime that it relates to the deletion of the clauses around the sale of the car park, and I would be supportive of that. If anyone else is, actually, I'll just put it on second. I can do that, I think. So I'll just put the amendment on the Lime for consideration.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Fotakis.
I believe that the reason it's documented here is that the leasing extension request and the sale of 25 Sydney Street does not need to be determined concurrently, and that certainty regarding the status of the lease extension request and revised transition plan will better inform the land sale decision-making process at a later time. And thank you for requesting this amendment, Mayor Cole. I'm fully supportive of this reason.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to support this. I think removing the consideration of one lot on a commercial matter, which is, as Councillor Gondaszewski referred to, is a completely different matter to the one considering the extension of a lease. And it's also, with regards to 25 Sydney Street, also involves a tenant and a lease that's in place. So I think it just makes the decision before us simple, but I think it also allows us time to actually resolve the lease and associated amendments through the AG's department first, and then be able to actually approach any potential sale and advertising and sale of 25 Sydney Street quite a lot more clearly. So happy to support.
Councillors. Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? All those against? No one's against. It's unanimous. Back to the substantive. Councillors, any further comments? Look, I will speak to it. This has been a difficult issue. I think we all have been through the experience of the Haynes Street Reserve transition plan and know exactly how difficult that was, what a process it involved, a lot of work went into that. And I believe that we were thinking that that had been completed, that we had actually resolved a really tricky issue, that we had the support of the Attorney-General, that we were returning land to public open space in line with our public open space strategy, and that we had been out to the community, sought their views, sought the views of the stakeholders involved, and that we had basically been able to, in a very rare situation, come to a solution that overall everybody was relatively happy with. Residents around the park, stakeholders on ground leasing buildings. I do recall at the time thinking and asking, have we heard from the Department of Health, and was told that everything was fine and that they were aware that their lease was coming to an end and hadn't raised any objections. And we proceeded down that path and we locked down an agreement with the Attorney General, which involved a deed of trust over land that is for recreational purposes, with commercial operations happening on it. And we worked with people like Kids Galore to ensure that when they did go out seeking other sites, that they got early advice from our planning team to make sure that they could find a site that would be suitable for childcare. So a lot of work went into this, and it was very difficult then to hear from the Department of Health after that process had concluded that there was an issue in terms of their lease. It probably would have been best that the letters that were sent to the Department of Health were included as attachments, and I don't know whether they can be included as part of the minutes, because I think that those letters are quite an important part of this process, that the department was written to in December to advise the direction that council was going in, and that it would be unlikely that administration would recommend entering into a long-term arrangement with the Minister for Health following the expiry of the current lease on the 30th of June 2021. That was in December 2017, some 3.5 years before the expiry of the lease. And then again, once that decision was made in 28th of May 2019, confirming, but I believe we didn't have confirmation back from the Department of Health that this provided a problem and a request for a lease until late 2020. So whilst we're dealing with some of the most vulnerable people in the community that desperately rely on this service, and I have the greatest empathy, I also do feel that the Department of Health does need to provide us with a plan, that this is something that they should have done some time ago, that this has been put at the doorstep of the City of Vincent as something that we must do, but we really do rely on the Department of Health to come to us and tell us what their plan is. We heard this evening that there is a facility with 2 consulting rooms available, that there is a budget bid before government, that won't be known until August. Then I'm not sure whether we're supposed to wait for a design and construction phase, which could last years. We're really needing to have clearer information from the Department of Health. So on this issue of a 3+3, I can see from the position of the petitioners, the parents, the people who rely on this service, it may seem harsh, but I do believe we need a mechanism to actually rely on to make the Department of Health tell us what their plans are, because up until this point, and based on what I have been told and advised and what the report says and the contents of those letters sent by the city, it has been at beyond the 11th hour that the Department of Health has informed us that they do want this extension, and they're seeking parity with another user group that was part of this process that we went through in terms of actually designing, facilitating and getting endorsement of this transition plan. So the thought of evicting the tenants off Hayne Street Reserve is not something that comes to mind. I think this is really about finding a mechanism to require the Department of Health to give us a time frame, to tell us what their plans are, whether it is a lengthy design, tendering, building program that they wish to pursue, or whether they have an alternate site where they could transition the dental surgery whilst they undertake a lengthier project. So with the thoughts of the tenants in mind, it is very important that we provide some surety and extension this evening so that they know that there is more time to do that. And overall, I'm in favour of proceeding. I am interested in council members' view of the 3+3. I do see that mechanism there to provide for that implementation update from health, and it does appear that the Attorney General's office is also saying that they want an implementation update prior to the end of the 6-month lease. So I believe that in adopting that, there would be every intention, and perhaps it needs to be made clearer, that if that is received, then it would automatically be a 6-month lease. I don't think there's any problem with that. But based on the lack of information provided since this news was first discussed with the Department of Health, I do think that we do need some kind of mechanism to require Department of Health to give us more details of their plans to either relocate permanently or temporarily. Council members, Councillor Fotakis.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I just want to add to that. I did give some thought to amending 3.1 and 3.2 with just 3.1 being a straight out 6-month extension. But when I became aware of the extensive contact that had been made with the department and the length of time that actually carried over. I mean, some years, we're not talking months, it was quite a considerable period of time. Like you, Mayor, I think this is the best course of action moving forward.
Councillors, any further comments? Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment that we can't say how we would vote on a future matter, but if it were to come back for consideration to extend the lease to enable that continuity of care for people with disabilities at the dental clinic, that's something that I would look favourably upon. I think it's important that we do, where we can, take the opportunity to support people with disabilities in our community. But I think the Mayor said it very friendly, but I'm very frustrated that we're in this position, and given the length of time and engagement there's been with the department, that we're now put in this position where we have to go through these multiple amendments. We're a small local government, and they're a large department. They're working with people in need, and I feel like they really need to lift their game here. I'm very annoyed about it, shall we say. So I support the officer's recommendation, but I look forward to seeing what this development plan is and how we can successfully transition the dental clinic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Loden. Are there any further comments? Okay. So we have an amended substantive now that is just dealing with clauses 1 through to 6. I'll put it. All those in favour? That's unanimous. I declare it carried. Thank you, councillors. The next item raised from a member of the public gallery is item 12.1, future use and management of 34 Sheraton Street, Perth. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Hallett, seconded by Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation. I think I just wanted to acknowledge, I guess, the work of the Norwood Association over many years. I know it's been probably a difficult time earlier this year with Anton's passing. So, condolences to everyone who knew him and has worked closely with him. I think the community garden has provided a really wonderful service at that end of Vincent, which I think is probably underutilised, underappreciated elsewhere around Vincent. And I think it's really exciting to see the Museum of Perth coming in and taking over the site potentially and working with the community garden. I think that's a really good opportunity to enliven that area and I guess get it to deliver that community benefit that it's so capable of doing. So happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hallett. Councillor Gontaszewski, nothing to add. Councillors? Look, I do just want to note and pay respects to Anton Haynes, who was a member of the Norwood Neighbourhood Association and was really instrumental in setting up the community garden. He spent so many hours toiling away at the garden. He had a very impressive worm farm. I know that whilst at first he was nervous about the childcare centre moving in to next door to him, he became someone who invited the children and carers in to look at the garden, check out what the worms were doing. He was a really community-minded person, and I was very saddened to hear that he passed away earlier this year. So I just want to say thank you to Anton and for his contribution to the neighbourhood. It was really appreciated, and it's really wonderful that the Museum of Perth wishes for that garden to continue. For a long time, we've been looking for a solution for Chariton Street. At one stage, we were going to spend money upgrading the facility. We talked to the Norwood Neighbourhood Association at length about whether they could take on a lease over the property. We also felt that was quite burdensome for a small community group at that time. And every now and then an opportunity comes out of the blue and seems to just work really, really well. And I must say that when you see all of the pieces fall together, this could be a wonderful outcome. So the decision will lie with the Minister for Lands. It's not the City of Vincent's decision to make. And I note that we also had another written question on notice about this evening about the sale of this property to the neighbour. It's not the City of Vincent's property to sell. It is owned by the state government. We have had a management order over this property. It hasn't been utilised. It has been fenced up. So I fully support the city putting our weight behind the Museum of Perth and supporting them in their endeavours to take this over. We'll be happy to, do whatever we need to do to support that, letters, meetings, etc. Because I think this would be a fantastic outcome for the building, for the community, for the little kids at the childcare centre next door. I think this would be a really nice hub, and to see it utilised in this way and restored at no cost to the taxpayer, other than through grants that are going towards, they still call it work for the dole. I think that just sounds so outdated, but I did see that referenced in the report. So this could be a fantastic outcome, and really hope that our support will help Museum of Perth secure the management order of Chariton Street going forward, retaining the community garden and having that connection back to the community. Any further comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item raised was 9.1, which is the draft Robertson Park development plan. This was a written statement with a question on notice around the player huts. Moved by Councillor Toppelberg, seconded by Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Well, first of all, very pleasing to see that in the definition that was asked some meetings ago, what the difference is between a master plan and development plan. We were promised it's something that would happen much quicker, and it has. So that's great news, because these things sometimes linger for a while. I'm very interested. This is a step in the process. I'm very interested in what comes back from the community. Just wanted to talk about a few specific things. I do note the support of the operator of the Robertson Park Tennis Centre, as was referred to, the club. I note the some of the requests are very tennis-centric, and things like parking, exclusive parking for staff members, improved fencing and safety, which effectively means cordoning it off, other than for access to those who are granted access by the operator of the facility. I think that's something that's kind of at odds with the direction that this is going in generally, but those matters can be resolved. I do want to talk about the huts. I understand heritage. I understand that because they were built relatively recently to the operation of the courts, that they weren't considered to be an integral part of it. But unlike some things that I think can be well represented in photographic, photographic, what's the term that was used? Recollections of photographic documentation. Thank you, Mayor Cole. I think that they are something that is a unique quirk of that part of the world, and I think that to potentially demolish them or remove them would be a great loss if they're not considered integral to the actual heritage listing of the park. I think they are a part of the heritage and character of the use of the park, certainly for many decades, and they do serve a functional purpose. I think if you look at some of the aspirations of the plan that talk about seating areas, shade, even the dog walking area, to be able to find ways to link those two. So I guess as a question, are they movable in their current form, or are they able to be just uprooted and moved elsewhere, or would they need to be demolished and rebuilt?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we do have advice from the Heritage Council that they are able to be moved, but the actual feasibility of moving them and the cost to do this has not been costed up at this point. We would suggest that we would gain through the community the importance that they see in these huts, and that heritage is that reflected through the huts themselves. And if it is, then we would go through the process of understanding the cost of that so that they can provide that shade amenity as suggested.
So without amending the proposal, how do we get guaranteed that that will form part of the consultation? Is that just something that we have in discussion here, so it's a matter of record and acknowledgement? Is that the correct way to do it, or does it need to be an amendment?
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's why we've outlined that on the development plan itself regarding the huts, and we will ensure that everything marked on the development plan is something that is up for discussion through the community consultation. So that would be another way of holding us to account on that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, look, I think that there was some concern expressed. I think one of the key things that we need to do when this does come back to council after the consultation is to look at the cost of implementation of the ideas and present a realistic timeline for community. I think that one of the key opportunities that will emerge, and we should look at proactive discussion, is about, there was talk about it in relation to parking last week, but more so the aspirations, the redevelopment of the sites where the Italian Club and the Italian Cultural Centre sit across the road, and the potential for some sort of pedestrian access between the two, I think would be a really valuable link, and that may be something that could be funded outside of our usual channels. But yeah, I appreciate the sensitivities of some of the variety of interests involved, and think that the plan as it is, I'm happy to support to go out to consultation and look forward to what comes back.
Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation and the proposed plan for consultation. I think we can already see that there's some good alignment in the proposal with the community engagement that's happened so far, but obviously that's up for far more discussion through the process of consultation. This is a park that has a very active local community. The Friends of Robertson Park have been great champions for this space, and the acknowledgement of that, I guess, deep history and diversity of the park that many people probably aren't aware of, and hopefully through the consultation process, some of that architectural and Aboriginal heritage and just other, community heritage, sporting, etc., can be highlighted and part of, I guess, a celebration of space and place that some of these plans can facilitate. My only other comment is if not already, I know it's not part of any kind of proposed aspect of the park to change, but possibly engaging with the Western Australian AIDS Council and any HIV positive associations that have a connection with the AIDS Memorial as well. But yeah, great to see this out there.
Councillor Fotakis.
Thank you, Mayor. Through, I'm not too sure whether the manager can answer this. It's just to get a clarification in the report, and it's just a reference to funding by the state government, and it's reference to the funding, the $100,000 funding being for the tennis courts. And just to clarify whether that $100,000 is the funding that was committed by local member John Carey, member for Perth, for the multi-use courts, as it was championed to build the City of Vincent's first public netball courts for the North Perth Dynamites Netball Club. So I just want to get some clarification of the what the expectations of that $100,000 is for.
Through you, Mayor Cole, absolutely. It says the public courts, but more specifically, it is for the two items that are listed last in the upgrade, in the courts section of the budget that you see within the reports, that they are highlighted in apricot, the 3 multi-sports courts and the lighting for those multi-sports courts, 70,000 and 30,000 equaling that 100,000.
And just further, with regards to parking, and I'm sure this development plan is going out for consultation, and I know that it was raised by members of the public last week, as it was our council members, including myself. So the response on my question regarding the parking on Fitzgerald Street at the rear of the Italian club, that it wasn't considered because people needing to access across a busy road. So I'm just trying to understand that when we're looking at taking into account parking and the difference between that when it's for general sort of recreational use, when we've been asked to consider planning matters and parking issues, access to public transport is one of those. And I know that there's been a number of items that have come before me where East Perth train station's been one of those access points, and people having to actually cross across busy roads in order to get to Summer Street. So I really want to get an understanding when we're going through this process that we've got all of that parking that's located in that section, what the difference is when we're looking at considering that in this process, very different to planning, if at all it should be.
Through you, Mayor Cole, absolutely. I note that the difference there, that is surrounding the fact that we do see that was in relation to the parking on Randall Street and that wanting to really access the community garden. It's also noting that a key stakeholder or user of the park are people, the elderly people that may not want to cross a busy thoroughfare. And it's also noting that the main parking, the parking that you mentioned, does have a lot of bays, and we would not want to consider that amount of bays being the main parking due to that thoroughfare and due to not understanding the long-term use of that site.
Okay, so it's just to actually clarify that it's more the consideration of it not wanting to skew the need to put those closer bays rather than that a general consideration that there is a lack of parking.
Through you, Mayor Cole, absolutely. So it is so that the immediate parking is not skewed as that is seen as a requirement. Of course, we'll be consulted through the community consultation, but we do see that at the moment that being a requirement for bays to be immediately adjacent to the site.
Anything further, Councillor Fotakis? Councillors? Councillor Loden?
Thank you, Mayor. Just on the topic of parking, and apologies if this was part of the discussion last Tuesday, do we have occupancy data to back up the need for additional parking being created?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I don't believe so.
And do we know what the parking restrictions are around that area as well?
Through you, Mayor Cole, not off the top of my head, no.
And recognise it would have been easier to receive that in advance, a bit tight notice this week. So I have an amendment to move. I don't know what colour it is. Can't see from the but it's the first one, which is around parking.
It's the darker green, Councillor Loden.
The darker green, how appropriate. So I would like to move the amendment to remove the parking bays to the north, if I can get a seconder.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Toppelberg. Go ahead, Councillor Loden.
Thank you. Look, from my perspective, I think we should be avoiding putting additional parking into public open space wherever possible. I recognise that there may be a need for this, but I'm not convinced that we've demonstrated that need. I'm happy for that to be part of the consultation if the consultation demonstrates back that there is this need. I'd also like to see what the parking restrictions are in the area as well. Our focus should be on getting people to walk, ride their bikes, use public transport and then drive their vehicle to access this site. So I think that would encourage that behaviour as well. In addition, it saves us $120,000 out of this budget as well, which is currently on budget. Thank you.
Councillor Toppelberg.
Just briefly, I tend to agree if there's an overwhelming need for there to be more car parking, that will present itself. But I think that forward thinking as a vision for what the park should be 30, 50 years down the track, the idea of putting car parking in there from the outset is not in line with my thinking. So happy to support the amendment, but if it comes back during the consultation period that it's deemed to be essential for short, medium or long term, then I'm happy to consider that at the time.
Thank you, Councillor Toppelberg. Councillor John, sorry, I'll start again. It's the mask. Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. On the one hand, I completely agree with Councillor Loden and Councillor Toppelberg. On the other hand, I do accept the city's position that putting in the community garden in that side of the park might increase some parking requirements for people that may be wanting to, I don't know, bring plants or, you know, fertiliser or mulch or whatever that they can't source on site. And so I do envisage that if we were to ask about that the community might tell us that some additional parking was required. And it's a question about whether we go out with a possible change and consult on it and then get told, no, we don't need this change, or we go out with the status quo and then potentially implement a change. And so I guess my question is, we've talked about consulting on each individual item on the plan. If we took out the angled parking on the plan, it's not an item anymore. Are we going to specifically consult about parking if we take this out?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we will specifically consult on parking, whether we take this out or not, but the community will not be able to see how we propose the parking to be reflected visually on the plan. That's why we would recommend to keep the plan as is, so that the community can see what it would look like and they have a good picture to say, yes, I like the look of that, or no, I do not.
Okay, thank you.
Can I jump in with a question? Where we have the parking, we currently have on-street parking. So we're replacing parallel parking with 45-degree parking. Can you park where the green nibs are? Or would that would probably be I'd say, would that be a no, because it would stop people from backing out and having visual. So you're sort of, overall, how much car parking are we actually gaining? Has anyone done the numbers? Because you're losing the ability to parallel park, so at least 2 vehicles.
We have, it's gone from 18 days and the proposal will go to 24 days, Nicole.
So sorry, I didn't see that in the apologies. So that would be 6-bay gain.
Nicole, correct.
I'm supporting the amendment. Any further comments? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Yes, I'm supporting the amendment too. I do think that if we go to the community with this plan as is with angled parking, it's very unlikely that we'll get a response to say, no, we don't need that parking, take it away. And given that the net gain is only 6 bays, on balance, I would prefer the community to consider the option of more green space in that area. If they do demonstrate that, yes, we really do need 6 more, consider it at that point, but happy to support the amendment.
Councillors, any further comments? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Back to the substantive.
Thank you, Mayor. Now to turn to dog fences. I had 2 questions. Firstly, if we put a fence around the dog area, will any other user groups be able to use that space, or will it only be dog users who effectively use that space by creating the fencing?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we would suggest that this would be a dog area, not exclusively, but that dogs would always be permitted in this area.
And a few years ago, maybe it was a few years ago, at Lesley-Lehman Reserve, there was a proposal to create a dog fenced area, low one from memory, in the south eastern corner. And at the time, there was some discussion and debate within council, and the resolution was to, instead of creating a fence and truncating up that space, we planted out the southern side, which was the particular side of the dog area that people were concerned about dogs running onto the road. Was that option considered instead of putting a fence around the area?
Through you, Mayor Cole, it was considered, but in speaking with our parks team, they do not recommend the planting option due to a series of reasons, the hedging not providing that barrier sufficient enough because it would take many years to establish due to the specific site of Robertson Park and the vandalism issues that the site does specifically have. This vegetation may have increased issues with growth if it was subject to that vandalism. So therefore the hedge would not be able to necessarily enclose dogs and would pose a risk and could be seen as minimising the use for dog users if they do not have that certainty that it is a significant enough barrier to stop dogs running onto the road. There was also another reason that the parks team mentioned with the fact that the maintenance of a hedge in that location would be quite costly and would require a significant resource compared to the dog fence.
Thank you. And so just to clarify on the vandalism, that's basically people going past and pulling them out, is that correct? Which is a higher risk in this location than, say, Lesley-Lehman Reserve?
Mayor Cole, that's correct.
And on the cost side, they said it's more expensive, which makes sense because they've got to go and trim it all the time. Do you have an idea of, compared to the 40 grand for the fence around there, the cost to maintain a hedge over, say, 10 years?
Mayor Cole, that would depend on the level of vandalism, so I do not have exact costs on me.
I'm unsure on this one, but I'll move it anyway and see what happens. There's a second amendment, which I think, is that on the light green maybe? Yeah, oh, there you go. What a guess. So to remove the dog fence, replace it with a hedge to prevent dogs from running onto the road. If I can get a seconder.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Castle. Go ahead, Councillor Loden.
Thank you. I'll probably describe this as a tentative amendment. I'm not going to die in a ditch over it. But on balance, I think I'd prefer to see us using natural vegetation and things like that to create a barrier and create that open space and that feel of open space without putting a fence through it. And it does feel more consistent with what we've done previously. But I'm happy to be convinced otherwise as well.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I'm a bit the same. I'm supportive of the concept, and I'm supportive of this amendment because I do think we've had a number of discussions over the last few years about using softer and more natural barriers in place of metal or wood dog fencing. I think it's more attractive and it's more in keeping with the what we're trying to achieve in our public open spaces. I am a bit surprised to hear administration's response to that because I thought we had that conversation and that they had been supportive in the past. You know, I understand that that's potentially a problem. And again, this is going to go out for consultation. So perhaps we will get some feedback from the community that they would prefer to have a harder barrier. I did have a question about the vandalism. Is that something that we are experiencing, particularly in this location? And I guess I'm concerned that our answer to that is to not put in something that could be vandalised as opposed to potentially dealing with the vandalism in other ways. I'm not sure what my question is, but is it something that is specific to this location, or have we seen that around other parks in the city?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I would say that it's more so at this location, but there is also some issues that I would say are widespread that the parks team have flagged with the planting. Others include the excrement of the dogs, which is also a hazard for administration to clean up in that area, and that this is actually a very highly trafficked area by both humans and dogs, so that would have an effect on the planting as well, beyond the vandalism that is mentioned, but I would say that that is particular to this site.
Thank you. Look, I understand that and I appreciate that, but I suppose I'm still in a position that I'd like to see what the community feels about this and explore ways that we could make these kinds of options work.
Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question. Has it already come up, a request for a fence or some kind of barrier, given that it is already a heavily used dog park? You know, are there issues and have dogs been injured that we know of?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I don't know of any incidents of dogs being injured. It is just regarding feedback received. Firstly, that dog walkers are we see as a very key stakeholder or user of this park, and feedback that an enclosed area would increase that use and the enjoyment of the space from a dog walker's perspective.
Thank you. I mean, I guess I support the idea of not having fences and having green space, you know, hedges, etc. But I think I won't support the amendment for the similar reason to Councillor Gontaszewski's comment about the previous one. I'd rather have a fence on there for the public to be able to go, we don't want that. And then we might decide to put a hedge in instead, but I'd rather have quite a invasive addition to the area, very clearly available for people to comment on.
I'd also just like to comment. I would support the intent of the amendment, but I know from past experience, every time we've tried to put a fenced area in the middle of a green space, it has been highly contentious, and we have always erred towards landscaping. So the idea of having a fence in the middle of this green space, and I can, see that the boundary is vegetated with trees already, and it creates a sort of natural space. But that could actually have quite a significant impact by sort of fencing that entirely. So similar to Councillor Hallett, I sort of feel that we need to put this out there for consultation, but perhaps rather than removing it altogether, we need to actually say that we're considering a more enclosed dog area and would like to seek the community's advice on whether that should be fully fenced, partially fenced along Stewart Street and vegetated, or fully vegetated. And that's what we did when we dealt with Charles Verriard. We had to actually go out with all of the options because there was a major backlash, which led to a very heated council meeting over the use of a fence in a what some people like to see as uninterrupted open green space. And I know this was also an issue at Forest Park in the past. So my preference would be not to remove it altogether, but to be very clear that we haven't determined what that barrier would be like, and that we would be seeking their views on fully fencing, partially fencing along Stewart Street, and part vegetated or wholly vegetated. But I can't move amendments, and we're dealing with amendment before us. So I won't support the amendment in its current form, but I do agree with the intent of the amendment somewhat. Councillors? Councillor Gonchevsky?
I won't support the amendment just simply because I think that the one area from my experience and understanding of the people that use the site that they would like to see fenced is Stewart Street. So I suspect that having further enclosure of the site within the park is, and I think that was also represented to us in the chamber from Mr. McDermott, but I haven't reviewed the screening to 100% confirm, but that is my recollection. So look, I'm happy to go out with it as it is. I'm looking forward to taking the hound to Robertson Park and having an on-site discussion, because I think that's the way we're going to get the best information here. And I can assure everybody that I think we'll canvass all the options. But I think I'm happy to sort of clearly indicate that the intention is to provide some enclosure for the safety of the and the, I guess, amenity of the dog park community, and I guess removing and amending the current plan. I'm not sure that will quite as clearly indicate that. So someone wants to craft up a very detailed amendment in relation to the options, I would support that. But otherwise, I'm just happy to go out the way it is, and with a view to having that discussion with the community that use the park, including the dog walkers there.
Very sensible. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the amendment. Sorry, Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. I'm not a fan of fencing parks, full stop. I'm certainly not a fan of fencing dog parks, as for reasons I actually think it creates as many issues as it prevents. But just as a general comment, and not presupposing what comes back from consultation, in the event that we do decide to put a fence in, if it's going in there for a utilitarian reason, which, as Councillor Hallett suggested, may be to protect dogs, it may be to protect people, who knows? But the outcome should not be the intent. I'm not going to support the amendment as it stands, but the intent of the amendment is that we don't end up with the cheapest possible solution, which we've got in a number of our reserves, which actually lessens the amenity experience for everybody. And whilst it provides that utilitarian result at a cheap cost, doesn't meet the aesthetic standards that would be expected. So I think in the event that this is supported through the consultation, whilst North Perth, the chain mesh style fencing which is shown is synonymous with much of what has existed in North Perth for many years. We've got some examples of it. You can, even within the chain mesh world, you can do that with a design sensibility and sensitivity that actually makes it somewhat attractive. And so I would hope that that's considered in the report that comes back to council, regardless of the general view on fencing the park.
Thank you. Councillors, any further comments on the amendment? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? 3 in favour. All those against? 6 against. I declare that lost. We're back to the substantive. Any further comments?
Yep. So, sorry. I won't propose another amendment. I'll maybe save that for when this comes back for consultation. As it like says, 1 out of 2 ain't bad, right? Still a pass mark. I'm happy to support the proposal as it stands. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments on the substantive? I'll put it. Oh, yes. Sorry, you do wish to.
I just want to quickly say that I think that the process so far has been solid, and I'm appreciative of it, and also appreciative. Well, it has. It's been a solid approach to engagement. I think they've talked to the community, and I think I see the community's voice reflected in the plans that we've seen before us. So I'm always appreciative of that and looking forward to getting feedback.
I agree. And can I just layer that also with the fact that this development plan does tick our strategic boxes in terms of creating more public open space, rationalising the tennis courts, and having that strong stakeholder involvement, introducing multi-sports, particularly for young women and girls. So yes, agree. Well done. Thank you. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Yes, everyone voted. Thank you. That was unanimous. Okay, next item. Next item raised was 10.2, which is the proposed 12-month trial of new and amended parking restrictions in the streets surrounding Hyde Park, Vincent Hyde, William and Glendower Streets, Perth, North Perth, Mount Lawley and Highgate. Have a mover and seconder, please. How about someone from Zoom land? Thank you, Councillor Loden. Moved, seconded. Anyone else? Councillor Castle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I must confess there's been a lot of email chatter back and forth and around the data for this. I'm supportive of the idea of introducing the parking restrictions in this area, but I'm a little bit concerned about that we've got this the right way around, and I'm interested in listening to the debate around this as well. But broadly, I think that what proposed and the intent is what we're looking for, but I suspect there'll be some amendments or potentially a deferral of this item.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Yes, look, I'm broadly supportive of the recommendation. I think I have some questions around our process in deciding in these cases whether to proceed with a trial versus consultation, and I can see that there is a amendment on the table in a colour that I'm not aware of that has been prepared by Mayor Cole, which I'm happy to move if I have a seconder.
Before you do that, it's not exactly written as I requested.
Oh, okay.
I just noted that it says for 12 months from date of installation at the end of clause 2. Given that it's not a trial, that should be removed. And also, I don't necessarily agree with the time frame. I cannot understand why we couldn't have a report before August 2021. The last advice to us was that that would come back in June.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it May? June. Yes. So I also don't support August.
So perhaps I can move an amendment with those changes to what is written on the whatever colour it was.
White.
White? Oh, that's boring. So the amendment would read that in clause 2, delete approves for the trial period and the words for 12 months from date of installation, and insert endorses for the purpose of public consultation the proposed restrictions. And then in clause 3, as is on the screen, returning the report by June 2021.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Fotakis.
I don't really need to speak to the amendment. I think that the discussion on this is probably more relevant to another item on the agenda tonight, which is the engagement framework, that perhaps we need a process to determine when it's appropriate to go straight to a trial or when to go to consultation. I think in this case, there's no reason to go to a trial when we have the time and the ability to consult first. So that would be the reasons for the amendment.
Who was the seconder? Councillor Fotakis, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of correspondence on this particular issue, not only recently, but during my term as councillor. It's a bit of a hot spot when it comes to parking. Obviously, we get a lot of usage by the park. Probably more so over the recent times in 12 months. Small scale families and individuals and dog walkers. It's one of my favourite parks in the city, and less so for events, which I think have also posed to be a bit of concern to residents around that area. But for me, there's a lot of changes in the parking that's proposed here. I often get differing opinions from differing residents as to what their thoughts are with regards to parking, the length of stay, where those restrictions should be, and whether we should also entertain sort of some sections that are resident parking only. So I think for those reasons, I feel more comfortable that we go out for consultation and allow the community to really come back to us, giving us more thorough interrogation of really where their concerns are and where they see the possible solutions on the options that will be before them.
Thank you. Any further comments on the amendment? Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Yes, I was concerned when I saw this concept of a trial come before council. It wasn't something that was part of our usual way of dealing with changes to parking restrictions. It wasn't something that was requested by council, and it wasn't something that has arisen through the accessible city strategy, that we would spend money on signage for short to medium term trials without consulting with the community. And as was raised with us via email, that we're considering a draft community engagement strategy and policy today, and then also potentially considering changing our process in relation to parking to reduce the community engagement rather than maintain or increase it. So I am very supportive of this amendment. Whether I'm supportive of the overall item itself in relation to our previous consideration of parking is something I'll listen to the further debate on.
Thank you, Councillor Gonchevsky. Any further comments on the amendment? Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. Just a question through you to the Director. The wording of the amendment says to consult. Can we just get clarification from the Director what that would mean? Does the consultation and the report back provide additional data? Does it involve consulting with the park users, the surrounding businesses, just the landowners, letter drops? How would we actually intending to consult if this amendment is passed as is written?
Through you, Michael, I would anticipate that we would need to speak to the local residents that will be affected by the changes on the streets where the restrictions were proposed, and also park users will be affected. So that's the difficult thing, I think, is to be able to meaningfully engage with the park users in a short period of time. So that's the reason for the 2 dates being proposed. I think earlier it was suggested that the earliest we could come back with the consultation results to council, the earliest would be June and the latest would be August. So there's the window we would anticipate to be able to carry out something meaningful with the local residents and also with park users.
So just for clarity, as the amendment is written, are you saying that park users would not be able to be meaningfully consulted with the way that the amendment is currently structured if the report's to come back for June?
Through you, Nicole. What I'm saying is I'm not sure that we can meaningfully consult them in that time, and also with the current resources that we have. It's coming to the end of the financial year. There's quite a lot of activity, so that's part of the reason it's resources and time that we require to make that to be able to make that meaningful contact with park users.
Would it be fair to assume, if the amendment is passed as it's written, that there would be a small number of signs on site indicating where people could find the information, and that the surrounding residents in the would receive a letter drop. Would that be a fair, a reasonable expectation of council, or that would be a level of consultation that we would at least be satisfied that each dwelling surrounding would receive something not posted but actually at the dwelling, so we can be sure that it gets there, directing them to the information, and also that a way of engaging in a short period of time with park users is to at least direct them to the fact that the consultation is taking place?
Yeah, through my call, yeah, that would be normal. We would letter drop everyone in the affected area and then direct them to the website usually. I mean, there are other options as well, but direct them to the website so they can give us feedback. As far as park users go, if they don't live in the area, they won't be picked up by that letter drop. So it will be signage in the locations where the parking restrictions are proposed to be changed, and again, directing them to the methods by which they can give us feedback. And also the other way would be that we would actually physically walk around and speak to park users as much as we could as well.
Any further comments on the amendment? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Anyone against? All right, everyone's in favour. Okay, we're back to the substantive. Any further comments, amendments? Councillor Godszewski.
So can I just understand in relation to 2.1, the Vincent Street changes, as to why they're only applied Monday to Friday, and 2.3, the same with the William Street changes, as to why they're only proposed to be applied Monday to Friday, when the issues raised by the resident that appears to have triggered the proposed trial on the southern side of Glendower Street raised issues around access on weekends. And so I appreciate the commuter parking, but why it wasn't considered to do weekends on those two particular locations.
Through Michael, yeah, that is the answer, which is that commuter parking is the main issue they're trying to resolve. As far as the residents in Glendower Street, the proposal to change the southern side from 3p to 1p, that would apply at all times. So that would include weekends, evenings, etc.
Yeah, but it doesn't really. Okay, I'll just put it up. If we're going to consult, let's consult on a raft of changes to address all the potential issues that have raised with us by residents, and that would include me putting forward an amendment to change item 2.1 to it would say Vincent Street between Throstle and William Streets, both sides 3p, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and, well, I was just going to say it, yeah, Monday to Sunday, but it would delete Monday to Sunday. Parking restrictions in the currently unrestricted sections, and then to amend 2.3. So you'd add in additional wording in relation to 3p, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturday and Sunday.
So I can just do 2.3 again. Because we've got the
William Street between Vincent and Glendower Streets, eastern side 3p, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Oh, sorry, Monday to Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And the western side 3p, 8 a.m. to 4:15 p.m. Monday to Friday, and 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. Parking restrictions in the restricted sections of William Street, allowing for the existing clearway restrictions.
I'd be grateful for some advice from the Executive Director if my proposed amendments is at all clear.
Can I ask you a question before you finalise that? And you're not looking at Hyde Street?
No.
Okay, thank you. Advice for Councillor Gondaszewski. Who are you seeking the advice from?
Just if there's any comments from administration in relation to the wording of my amendment or the substance of my amendment. Oh, wait, I should get a seconder. Comments on the wording first and then the substance after.
Okay. It's seconded by Councillor Toppelberg. He had his hand up most enthusiastically.
Nicole, from what I heard, it's just extending those restrictions into the weekend. So I can't think of any reason off the top of my head why that would be a problem. The only thing I'd say is additional options means more consultation. So that would add to the complexity of the exercise that we'd have to undertake. So that's another issue, I suppose.
Thank you for that feedback.
Okay, would anyone else like to comment on the amendment? The seconder would like to comment.
Thank you. I get a feeling that we should, we'll possibly get feedback, and I will foreshadow the lengthy foreshadowing for the potential amendment when this comes back to council, depending on feedback, to make the weekend parking longer, 4p or 5p perhaps, because I think that's probably more reflective of the use in and around those times. But I think that the concept of having unrestricted car parking in the 6,000 postcode, particularly in a location that we know is parked out, and William Street in particular, we often see and have anecdotal evidence also of accommodation places that don't provide on-site parking, instructing people to come and park around Hyde Park, and we see a lot of that going on. I think that this deals with that to a degree where it's where the intent is to park for longer term, but I'm happy to show an intent that that weekends are potentially an issue as well, and to have that resolved through the consultation process.
Thank you. We're still on the amendment. Are there any final comments on the amendment? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Any against? No, that's carried. We're back to the substantive. Councillor Gondaszewski.
Thank you. A few years ago, I spoke with administration in relation to establishing a fairly transparent and, set process for the management of parking restrictions or assessment of parking restrictions when a resident raises them. At that time, I did not choose to proceed to bringing anything to council around a notice of motion in terms of that process being public. And this process here has made me think that that should be something that is revisited. With that in mind, may I ask a question of the Manager of Policy in Place, because it relates to the Accessible City Strategy, and how the current actions, I know you're intimately acquainted with that document, would allow us to, are we addressing this issue through the current actions as captured in the Accessible City Strategy, where the ad hoc assessment of parking, or are we going to, as a result of that strategy, have a more transparent, accountable and consistent process for dealing with the growing parking pressures in our residential streets?
Through you, Mayor Cole, there is an action in the Accessible City Strategy around, I might get the wording of this wrong, a business case, so that we have parking plans for different areas of the city so that we understand what those pressures are, and we can have a overarching approach, I suppose, or a strategic approach moving forward. So my answer would be that, yes, the Accessible City Strategy would address this.
Okay, thank you. I also just wanted to provide some clarification. I asked a question at the briefing last week in relation to the North Perth Town Centre parking, and the response in the briefing notes was essentially that it wasn't relevant. And I just wanted to provide some clarification that when the council considered parking restrictions around the North Perth Town Centre, we settled on essentially a model of assessing the parking data, the very valuable parking data that we were provided as part of that decision making. And we looked at those streets, and there was essentially a decision taken around, occupancy thresholds, distance from the town centre, etc. And it was a fairly consistent decision-making process, and one that I was essentially asking how the data that had been collected in relation to the Glendower Street site would have fit into that model, because I do think that model was relevant then, and I do think that having a model or having some decision-making framework would be very useful for administration, because I don't think that this process of what we've had presented to us and the process that we've had in relation to the need for council to be requesting this data on which to, evidence on which to make our decisions in this sort of situation is unreasonable, and I don't think it's unreasonable for the community to have an understanding of when they put forward concerns or requests in relation to parking in their area, how it's going to be dealt with, because at the moment we're seeing, you know, probably some inconsistency in that process, and that raises concerns. That said, I'm satisfied at this point in time to go out for consultation with the amended substantive, and so I will support the item.
Thank you, Councillor Gontaszewski. Are there any further comments for those who haven't spoken? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried. No one voting against. That takes us to item 9.2, the Community and Stakeholder Engagement Framework. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just a question in relation to the issues raised by Vern in his email submission in relation to the attachments that he referenced in his statement to the briefing last week that were not part of the package, and his questions in relation to the engagement panel. Is there any answers able to be given in relation to that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, absolutely. That would be, we used incorrect wording, I would say. The attachments are not attachments, but they are included. They're on page 47, and the best way to see that is when your report goes from portrait to landscape. They're the two documents which show the findings from the administration and the community workshop. We just simply missed putting appendix on the top of those 2 pages, but they are included. In relation to the community panel, we've included details in the report regarding the community workshop, how the people were selected for that workshop, how many people attended, and the details around when and where that was located.
Okay. I am very pleased that we are at a point where we have a draft strategy and policy to go out for consultation. I sincerely hope we will see maybe some of our blank community eco signs, etc., that may be utilised to try and get people interested in this document. And I would love to hear the comments on the document from the people in the community that have raised with me or in this chamber concerns around the city's engagement practice. I think the city does engage well and has good intention in the vast majority of cases, but this document, I'm hoping, will allow for us to have some guidance in the way that we should be improving our engagement. I have an amendment on the grey that I will move, but as I'm the mover of the overall motion, I will leave that for later. But yes, in the context of everything we're consulting on at the moment, I am sure it's going to be somewhat challenging to get interest in this, but I would really like to. So if you've had any issues with engagement at Vincent, this is your opportunity, and I can assure you they will all be read and considered in the presentation and preparation of the final document. Thank you.
That could be the line. If you've had any issues at Vincent, we will. Okay. The seconder was Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Yes, I have a question. Following on from the previous item where we discussed trials versus consultation, I'm just wondering if it's late in the stage for this particular item, but whether you've got any commentary, this is to the manager, sorry, about whether this document could assist the city in determining when it's appropriate to go straight to trial versus when to consult. And that perhaps that might be something that comes out through the consultation, but I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that at this point in the process.
Absolutely, we have. That's why are wanting to base this strategy and policy on that IAP2 framework, because that specifically says that level of engagement. Is it an informed, we're doing this and we're going out to do it, or are we consulting with you on how we do this? What is the level of consultation? And really trying to be specific and transparent with the community so that they understand what areas they can create change or give feedback, so that what they're giving feedback on can change our operations and our decision-making process. So we would see that each project would be allocated one of those sections of that spectrum, so that we are clear on where we would do each of those levels of engagement.
Thank you. Yes, I think I understood that. I suppose what I envisage is that perhaps it's one of the supporting documents that is for operational use that comes out of this strategy, is that there's a sort of middle ground in consultation where there is a trial that happens first, followed by a report or a consultation on how that trial went. So rather than just skipping straight to an informed position, we've actually gone out with a trial in place with the view to perhaps delaying the consultation until after that has happened. Happy for that to just be considered throughout this process, but I think the item that we just considered raises a good example of where it would be helpful to have a model that tells us, that gives us some criteria where it might be more appropriate to go straight to trial rather than consult first. Having said that, I'm really happy that we've got to this stage. It has been a little while coming and there has been a few false starts, but it's excellent to see a draft document that's ready for consultation. I know that there are a lot of community members who have strong opinions about how we consult, and as they should do, because it's an essential part of what we do and it's a foundation to all of our decision making. So I'm looking forward to hearing their thoughts on how this draft looks and their suggestions, if it can be improved in any way. I'm also really interested in the learnings that we can gain from both consulting on this strategy and policy at the same time as consulting on those bundled policies that are coming out, because I think that's a great opportunity to actually trial, there's that word again, trialling the process to see how it actually operates in the field. So I really look forward to seeing what comes back when the consultation is finished.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. Council members, comments? You've got an amendment, Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you. I'd just like to move the amendment on the grey in relation to recommending item 1.1.
That is strongly and enthusiastically seconded by Councillor Hallett.
This amendment is to change or add to the guiding principle that we will engage in a way that facilitates the involvement of impacted communities to add the sentence that we will go to the affected community and engage on site to ensure that interested, impacted and hard to reach groups are able to participate in decision making. And the reason is that when we did Imagine Vincent, which was a successful engagement process, we did go out to our community in a variety of ways. And that engaging on site through signage, pop-ups, community meetings, etc., ensures that the views of impacted community can be heard. And it also recognises that those impacted by decisions relating to public facilities or spaces may go beyond those that live adjacent. I do recognise that we need to be really conscious about the level of impact, and that if you live close to a public facility, that you may be impacted more by a change than someone that just visits occasionally. But I also think it's really, really important, and I've been banging on about it for quite a while, that we recognise that where we have public facilities and public spaces, that those that are impacted are more than just the people that live adjacent. And we've talked about going out to Robertson Park development plan, and the consultation plan as written did not include on-site signage or any pop-ups at the park with affected users. And I'm not saying that may not have evolved as part of the process, but it wasn't explicitly referenced, and it is now, and that's great. And as I said, looking forward to going down there. So yes, this is just for that. And I would really love to hear if that's strong enough language. So if there's anyone would like to review that and provide comment as part of the consultation, that would be great.
Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I'm very happy to support this. My main comment would be just that I think it's really important that we do place-based consultation, because I think it has a level of cut through that a noisy social media space doesn't. And I think we can reach people that we wouldn't otherwise.
Councillors, any further comments on the amendment? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Back to the substantive. Any comments? Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. Just this conversation, I think in the 12 years I've been here, the kind of how we consult has been either the subject of, the policy has been either the subject of an amendment or discussion or review for at least 8 of those at varying times. But I think the key thing for me is that what we have here is something that is the beginning of a conversation. It's not a draft document that's being released to say this is what's happening. It's very much something that we've been talking about internally for some time. There has been some angst expressed to me about the community engagement panel process, and that effectively a small subsection of the community is now deciding how we want to consult, and that's not what's happened at all. And I've been explicit with people who've made that comment to me to say that it's quite the opposite. You have to start somewhere. This is the beginning of a conversation. We've taken on board advice internally, externally from experts in the field. We've looked at the globally accepted framework for how you consult and engage. And but for me, the process really starts now, which is going out to the community and saying, this is something that we want to have a conversation with you about. We're not wedded to anything in particular that's in there. And further to my esteemed colleagues' comments earlier, we should be doing all we can to ensure that we get as much feedback as we can so that we have a strong platform going forward.
Thank you. Any further comments? I will comment because this has been something we've all been looking forward to, get to this point. So I'd like to say thanks to the team for getting us here. I think we all felt that we'd sort of reached our peak after Imagine Vincent, and that we'd learnt some really core lessons about how to get the best out of our engagement. And at that time, the intent was to move swiftly to capture that into a community engagement strategy. We have had a few highs and lows along the way, and I think we've sort of lost some of that great engagement that we actually really did well. I know, for example, with COVID lockdown this weekend, I was actually really, really excited about going to the Mez and just talking to people, because that type of engagement is deeply rewarding, and there's certainly a willingness from council to do that and to get back to that level of engagement that that we have all been used to in the past, and to have this documented and turned into principles and actually live in a document together is fantastic. Can I make some really minor comments? I'm just concerned that if the document's not graphically designed before it goes out, that it's not particularly engaging. And I think there's some really nice elements to it, like, for example, we talk about the demographics and what that actually means. I think that could be presented in a way that really tells a good story. So I guess I'm advocating for some desktop publishing before it goes out the door. And also this is just me and my, Councillor Gondaszewski will understand how wedded I am to the policy development and review policy. And I fought hard to have a policy document hierarchy presented in that. And so to read in the document that that's the strategy hierarchy, I'd actually say that for consistency, we should describe it either as the policy hierarchy or the policy document hierarchy. That is really getting quite sad, but it is important. People need to understand how our policies overlay and jigsaw together. So I will continue to raise these issues. Other than that, I'm really looking forward to engaging on this. We are in the situation where we do have a bit of a bottleneck of consultations coming up. We can see that as a challenge or an opportunity. I'm really hoping it's an opportunity and that we can lead the way by saying that these are all testing grounds for our draft policy and getting even more feedback that way. So thank you very much, Policy in Place. You've really delivered this month and appreciate the work. Councillors? Okay, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Smith, yes. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. We did have the notice of motion raised. We normally do go to that last, but would you like to deal with that now? Should we just be different? That's item 13.1, notice of motion, Councillor Jonathan Hallett, community engagement for eco-zoning.
I guess it sticks with the theme that we've just been talking about, so I can make it quick.
Oh, I've just got to get a seconder, otherwise it will fail miserably. Yes, it's been seconded, you're okay.
Thank you. It's a reasonably straightforward motion, essentially requiring that we do public engagement for our eco-zoning initiatives. I think most people are familiar with those initiatives and they're very well supported and I think they're great. I guess where I have, I think there might be a slight difference of, assessment between council and administration, at least from my perspective, is the level of which eco-zoning is, I guess, a technical decision about the placement of plants and mulch, etc., around boundaries of reserves according to where reticulation ends, etc., which is a highly technical kind of part of it. But I think we've got two examples recently, and Mr. Meyer is correct that it is a specific example, I guess, the issue that has been arisen in relation to both Biddy Park Reserve and also Monmouth Street Reserve in relation to, I guess, what I think is a bit of a disconnect between what the community expectation is for an eco-zoning project and what administration has proposed. I think they're both resolvable, but I think it would have been useful perhaps to have a slightly more robust consultation process prior to feed into the actual design itself. And I think being really clear as administration has responded in terms of the motion that we are seeking feedback and we're not just informing people of what we're going to do. But I do just want to make sure that that's clear. And so hence the notice of motion to ensure that we move towards consulting and not just informing for eco-zone projects in our parks and reserves, because I don't think informing is sufficient. Thank you.
Councillor Gondaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor Cole, and thank you for bringing this forward, Councillor Hallett. This sort of relates to the last item for me as well, and it is something for us to think about as we consult on this, is that to ensure that this type of thing is accurately captured in probably both our community engagement and also our asset management space. Essentially what I'm talking about is if you're going to make a change that impacts the community, we should be talking to the community. And we've had examples where we perhaps have not necessarily done that to the extent that I would like. And indeed, recently we've had instances where we haven't even informed. So, you know, that's challenging too. I think this also is in relation to making it clear that council may make decisions in relation to approving a budget that will approve certain capital works projects, but there may be we need to also make it very clear, and I think this goes some way to doing that, that those approvals in relation to setting aside funding for those works are subject to a consultation process being undertaken. And I'll be seeking to ensure that that's reflected in our budget this year. But thank you for bringing this forward, Councillor Hallett.
Councillors, any further comments on the notice of motion? Okay, I'm very happy to support it. That's my comment. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried, no one voting against. So that concludes the items that were raised by members of the public gallery this evening. So we'll go back to the beginning and deal with items that we have not yet dealt with. And just to be clear, I should have stipulated this. It was written all over the agenda, but just to be clear that items 11.2 and 12.3 have been withdrawn. So we're not dealing with those. They're effectively off the agenda. So we will go to item 9.3, draft Leederville precinct structure plan, draft Leederville place plan, and amendment number 7 to local planning scheme number 2. That perhaps shouldn't be in the title anymore, but we'll go with it anyway. Moved by Councillor Toppelberg, seconded by, have we lost Ashley?
He's got a financial.
Oh yes, sorry, my apologies. We very correctly have lost Councillor Wallace because he's made a financial declaration. Thank you very much, Councillor Wallace. So I've got a move by Councillor Toppelberg, seconded by, I'm still asking for a seconder, Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just let me grab my... happy to endorse the officer recommendation. Just give me one sec. I just want to have a look and see in relation to your comments, Mayor Cole. Perhaps if we can just get some comments from administration about, you made some comments before it was moved about the title. The title has been changed in the revised report. Okay, that's what I was just confirming. Okay, so the title is actually draft Leederville precinct structure plan and draft Leederville place plan. So the scheme amendment 2 has been removed from the current report. I don't have any further comments. I support the officer's recommendation and look forward to what comes back on both. Thanks.
Can I just ask, on what page of the report, what page number is map 2?
To you, Mayor Cole. It's actually only page 43 because this is
only 43.
Upload.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Gonchevsky.
Happy to support and note again the large volume of work coming out of policy in place this month. Awesome.
Can I just provide a bit of an update, because we did request, there's a number of issues raised or questions and queries raised, and we did opt to have a meeting on Friday to further discuss this, and there were a number of council members in attendance, myself. Let's just put our hands up, so who was at that meeting? Just, yep, so quite a few council members attended that meeting, and we discussed a number of issues. I indicated that I'd be prepared to put forward a series of amendments, but administration obviously felt sufficiently satisfied that they wanted to put them forward themselves. So I'm just trying to find your email, Tara, where you talk about the changes that were made since the briefings. I think it's important just to outline those. Would you like to outline them, or would you like me to?
Mayor Cole, I can outline them on was going to try and find my email, but I don't think that I'm going to be able to. So off the top of my head, we have amended, as you can see on the page that we outlined on page 43, the plan to sub-precinct map. So we have amended the area of the cityscape along Newcastle Street to reduce this just to the corner of Newcastle and Loftus Street. It was previously on the north side of Newcastle Street going further towards kind of Oxford Street area, but we have decided that those lots following feedback from council would go to the urban frame type A rather than the cityscape, mostly due to some concerns about the cityscape height. We've also made some significant changes to section 6, I believe it is, of the precinct structure plan. Let me just get to it eventually, regarding the language around the additional height. So that was regarding bonus height, but we've tried to reflect the language to ensure that it is shown that this is discretionary and it would only apply to the development that achieves the development requirements set out in section 5 of the plan. And so this is potential additional height. We've also included some additional criteria that you will see on page 65 of the report, page 35 of the plan, regarding public open space to ensure that the amenity that is provided through this is really quality amenity for the community. I think that covers most of it.
Can I just ask a question? Did we get approval from Leaderville Connect to use our statement, this is Leaderville?
Yes, we got that today.
And that will then follow after the executive summary?
That will be in the preface, yes, where at the moment we've just earmarked pending Leaderville, Connect. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
So just for those council members and for members of the public, Leaderville Connect, a local town team, wrote a really nice piece called This is Leaderville, which really just describes the urban context, the grit, the fine grain, what it is that makes up Leaderville, its community, its businesses, its people, its life. It's a really nice statement about Leaderville. It's a really nice introduction into the document. So I'd like to say thank you to Leaderville Connect for allowing us to use those words as part of this document. I think that is a really nice introduction into the document. Just to go through, so we've now got an executive summary. We're going to have a preface with those words from Leaderville Connect describing Leaderville. We've adjusted the cityscape area. We've removed the scheme amendment because the intent is that once we actually consult with the community, we want to understand the comfort levels on building heights and zoning. And the original proposal was just to put land uses, pull land uses out of the scheme. But now the proposal is that once we've consulted, we'll put forward a scheme amendment to put in the building heights and zonings into the scheme, which is very important if you want some surety around your heights and zonings. And Manager talked about the change of wording around development incentives for community benefit. And we're going to be using graphics as part of the document and community consultation to ensure that these major themes are conveyed in a user-friendly way. Yes, okay. So quite a bit. They were the main issues for me, and I feel a lot better now that we are removing the scheme amendment out for now, and that we will be seeking to put the heights and zonings in once we've been through this process with the community. So it is a long document, but there's a lot of really good information in there, and I think it's about how we present that to the community, that we need to take out the key parts, make sure they understand what we're talking about when we're talking about the cityscape and the frame and what that means for Leaderville in terms of Oxford Street. I think there's some very clear things that the community will need to know straight up when they look at this and what the key sort of themes are coming through. And I think that, that's possible to do that if we choose the right graphics and we provide the right, level of information to those that want that snapshot, as well as the much deeper documentation for those that really want to go through that in some depth. It might be your sort of your developers or people in Leederville Connect Design Group, or people that have a passion for urban design and technical documents. So I think we just need to be very clear about how we pitch it and the sorts of levels of documentation for the groups depending on interest. But yeah, happy to support it, and thank you for delivering this document. Councillors, any further comments? No? Okay. Oh no, is this still needed, just because we do have a document before us that has an incorrect graphic in it? So we do need to do this for administrative purposes. We don't? Is the correct figure?
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Cole,
19 tabled?
so part one of the statutory section is correct. There's an explanatory section that's incorrect. So for completeness, the amendment wouldn't hurt at all, but it's not going to cause an issue because part one is already, the important part is correct. That's the statutory section, part one.
Yes, but you know, we did once move a scheme amendment, but didn't then change the strategy. So I think we should go ahead and do it.
So there's nothing wrong with that, yes. It'll certainly be fixed up after advertising, but nevertheless, for completeness, it wouldn't hurt.
I think we do need, that's an important document for those like me that flicked past the first one and went searching for it and thought that's a bit weird. Okay. Councillor Gonchevsky's moving this amendment on the, but I think it's a bit more citrusy. Mandarin. Seconded by Councillor Fotakis.
Just saying, I'm always in favour of some consistency between her documents, and as pedantic as it is, but love the detail, Mayor Cole.
Thank you. Anyone who's tuning in and is wondering what on earth we're talking about, this is simply an amendment to change figure 19, which is a map, to reflect map 2 so that they are consistent. It's just an administrative fix-up. I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Yep, everyone in favour. We're back to the substantive. Is there any further comments? No, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried, and we look forward to seeing what comes back from consultation. Okay, the next item is 9.4, draft Beaufort Street Town Centre Place Plan. Can I have a mover and seconder? Moved Councillor Loden, seconded Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of amendments, which obviously I won't move at this point. I'll wait until others have a chance to speak. I did want to ask a couple of queries if I could. Firstly, on the lighting at Mary Street Piazza, the item is listed as a $20,000 expense, and I just wanted to see if I could get a bit more information around the basis of that cost. It feels expensive to me. If I did it in my backyard, which obviously I'm not, but if I did, I'd be installing a PowerPoint and running some cabling, and that feels expensive to be $20,000. So I was hoping to get some context on that.
Mayor Cole, absolutely. The $20,000 budget amount is for a high quality permanent solution. This can be revised. The temporary solution that was in the space previously was probably at the extreme other end of the scale. We would not be recommending to do such a temporary low cost installation, but there is definitely, if there's not comfort in this kind of level of quality, we can definitely relook at that to provide something in the in between.
So where does the cost come? Like in my mind, it's a PowerPoint and some, not fairy lights, but effectively some fairy lights that we plug in and run around the place. Is there other infrastructure that's causing this to be a 20 grand budget item?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, I believe it's the structure that the lights actually are attached to make sure that they're so permanent in a way that they're structurally sound for a long period of time. And I believe it's also the quality of the lights themselves, and not the level of lighting as in brightness, but their longevity.
So they're like high-end, expensive light bulbs and the poles to support the wires. Is that where the cost comes from primarily?
To you, Michael, I would say that covers it, as well as the actual fixtures, poles, and lights being aesthetically pleasing themselves, not just something that provides illumination.
Thank you. And then my second query was around how do we encourage businesses in our community to uptake solar? Not talking to the amendment specifically, but to ask a question around that. I understand we have an action in our sustainable environment strategy that somewhat covers this, and I just was curious if there's been engagement to date with businesses and what activities we've undertaken, and then what are planned going forward as part of the SES.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm not aware of the specific actions that have been taken through the SES, but all I can say is that if this was to be included as an action in this place plan, then we would be able to measure against that specifically for the Beaufort Street Town Centre.
Thank you. I'll allow the seconder to speak.
That's me. Thank you. I don't really have anything to add on this. I too asked similar questions about lighting, having installed some of my own, but I'm aware that installing lighting in a public space for the long term is different to going to Bunnings. Well, exactly. So I think, yep. So I guess my question is, in relation to the action in relation to Mary Street Piazza, if we were to leave the lighting in, the approval of installing lighting, is that separate from council's endorsement of the amount of funds to allocate towards the capital works? i.e., this is an approval in relation to lighting in Mary Street Piazza, and then as separately, essentially through this year's budget process, we actually, provide the actual allocation, which may or may not lead to a different standard of lighting being included in the piazza.
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's absolutely correct. Through the budgeting process, you would have the ability to change that amount that we have against this item.
Cool. On that basis, I'm happy to support this, and because I think we've been waiting for the Beaufort Street Place plan for a long time, and I'm very pleased to see a new, addition, chapter, whatever, addition, not edition, to the suite of place plans. I think they're very useful documents. So thank you very much for bringing this forward.
Councillors, Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the amendment on our stab, the move, maybe. One around the business community solar.
The move is the deletion of the Mary Street Piazza.
No, so I'll go with the other one then. What colour is that one?
The green.
The green?
I've got another green.
Awesome.
Okay, yep. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. So basically, in summary, the key opportunity for increasing solar penetration in Australia is there's a big growth potential in the business community. Part of the challenge is that the business community is not aware of these opportunities. They don't know how to effectively engage with it. There is parts in our sustainable environment strategy that talk to increasing the uptake of solar in the community, but it's not specifically targeted as our business community, as you might see, where we could see through the place plan. So this is proposed to create an action to engage more directly, either one-on-one with our businesses or through the town teams, to encourage them and connect them with opportunities for solar. The low-hanging fruit is just purely and simply understanding how the lease process works between the person who owns the building and the person who has the lease, and how they can both benefit out of the installation of a solar array on their roof. And how that connection process works. And then the second opportunity is where there are contestable sites, which are the large sites, there's potential for them to group together to form a power purchase agreement to access renewable energy at a lower cost than what they currently pay for fossil fuel power. It's up to the administration to figure out how effectively to do that engagement, but that's what the intent of this amendment is. Thank you.
Just a question to administration. From admin's comment on the amendment, I think you support it, or at least don't have any opposition to it. Can I just clarify your thoughts about this?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, we support the action as we have written it out in the amendment, with the timing to allow us to engage with the business owners initially.
Happy to support.
Can I ask a follow-up question on your question, Councillor Hallett? Does that mean that if council adopts this as written, that it's achievable, or in order to put in place this amendment with resources that can be supported by administration, are you suggesting that it needs to say that it's undertaken in 2020-23 to 24-25?
To you, Mayor Cole, yes, we would outline that in the implementation plan section of the place plan at the end to show that the work done on this action item would be conducted then. Okay, so we can, based on administration's advice, you're happy for this to go ahead, and then you'll put that explanatory time frame into the body of the document. Oh, my apologies. I didn't. It's all the heavy bolding and underlining. It's like, sorry, just scratch that waste of a couple of minutes of your life. I'm happy to support the amendment. Any other comments on the amendment? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare that carried. We're back to the substantive. Are there any further comments or amendments? Councillor Loden, third time lucky.
Just noting that I'd close debate if I'm
not proposing to amend the amendment. No, I'd just like to comment before you do that. I'd just like to say that I really hope that we can still get some strong engagement on this place plan, because it would be really nice to have a discussion about Beaufort Street at this particular juncture. I know there's a lot on and a lot to consult on, but I'm just hoping that there can be some ability to really engage with the local businesses and people who frequent Beaufort Street, whether that's in person or, through door knocking or whatever it might be. I'm very open to those suggestions from policy in place about how we get the best out of this engagement. You don't need to respond unless you wish to. That was a comment, really.
To you, Mecca, I do wish to. I think this is a perfect opportunity to use that location-based engagement, as it is such a location-based place plan, literally. So I think that would be a great way to do this specifically, so that we understand what those businesses and community members of Beaufort Street specifically want to see, and for inclusion in the place plan.
Great, thank you. Unless anyone who hasn't spoken wishes to speak, I'll go to Councillor Loden to close debate. Councillor Loden, do you still wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you. Just to say that I support the officer recommendation. I can, similar to Councillor Gonchashevsky, accept that it does cost a bit more to do things in the public realm. You can't just string up some fairy lights in your backyard the same way. Still seems a bit expensive, but I'll leave that to you guys to figure out. And I look forward to this rolling out. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Okay, that concludes strategy and development items for this evening. Well done. We have dealt with infrastructure and environment items, and we have dealt with community and business service items. In fact, we have dealt with all items except for the confidential item. That looks correct. Yes. Okay, so we have one item of business remaining this evening, and it is a confidential item, so we'll need a mover and seconder to go behind closed doors. Move Councillor Fotakis, seconded Councillor Loden. All those in favour? Declare that carried.